So once again, welcome everybody to the interactive virtual craft fair running from Tuesday the 23rd to Sunday the 28th of March 2021. This is a wonderful mix of live sessions, demonstrations, live chat, and the chance to buy direct from our exhibitors. All this is taking place on interact.handmadeinbritain.co.uk. I'm Alice and I'm a part of the Handmade in Britain team, and today we are joined by Rebecca. Rebecca is from Penplotter, and today we're going to be discussing exploring the natural world through mathematics and design. So with great pleasure, it's wonderful for me to introduce Rebecca. Hello Rebecca, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
It's very well, thank you. It's really lovely to see you this morning, and I'm really excited to kind of start to get to know you and your work a little better. It's the first time that Handmade in Britain have worked with you and had your work on board. So for everyone that's joining us, it would be wonderful just to get to know a little bit about your professional background and how that's kind of brought you to where you are and the work that you're producing at the moment.
Okay. Hello everyone. So my background, I suppose, is split in two almost. It's I started off doing mathematics, and then design sort of alongside that. So I trained in both in design and in mathematics. And then originally I was doing sort of analysis and maths as a day job, and the side of that I was doing screen printing and selling prints that weren't at all related to data or hadn't had any sort of influence from mathematics. They were just inspired by the outdoors, but quite standalone illustrations. And then a couple of years ago, I started wanting to bring in this sort of passion for mathematics and looking at data, and especially around the natural world, into my work as the screen prints and the sort of risographs and things. So yeah, so a couple of years I started doing that, and that's how Penplotter was formed.
It's wonderful. So with them kind of Penplotter, where did you come up, with the name for Penplotter?
So one of the tools that I use as part of the as my process is called as a pen plotter. So it links to the computer. You can use any pen, basically fountain pen, fine liner, various other things, or paintbrushes. And the code that I create from formulas that are described in the natural world and that I'm then translate into visuals is then plotted on a piece of paper. So I already had that sort of link to the Penplotter, and then with terre being earth in French, and the plot is in land, I just thought it was a really nice sort of link between the two, like plotting the earth, which is essentially what I'm doing by taking data from the natural world and visualizing it, and this tool that I'm using to start off the majority of my work being the Penplotter. So yeah, it's a bit of a tie between the two.
So it's really interesting actually how you go about, even starting with a piece of work, because I know, that we're using mathematics and you're using data. Now to create a piece, where do you start, kind of, marrying those two, and how does that bring in the natural world into your work?
So I suppose the natural world is the inspiration, and that's my starting point. It's so an inspiration for the piece doesn't necessarily start with data. It starts with going for a walk, seeing something like mountains or birds in the garden or whatever that is. And it's that curiosity that I start thinking, oh, I wonder if, whatever the thing that I'm sort of curious about. And then I start looking at data that has been collected. So like for garden birds, for example, there's the British garden survey that's done every year. So they've got lots of data available online to tell you about all the birds that have been seen, the numbers, the sort of percentages of the gardens across the UK. And actually that data is collected monthly as well as the annual survey they do. So the outdoors will provide the inspiration and the curiosity. I then go away and find data to find out more about that element of the natural world. And then from there, I start thinking of the bits that really stuck out to me, the bits that I was really interested in, and how I could visualize that and communicate that to other people to get other people interested in it as well, to spark that sort of curiosity.
I remember actually this year, it was the one weekend you were referring to the bird watch. I think it was the one weekend that it just absolutely just poured down with rain. I think it was so nice and sunny. So I remember that. So it's really interesting to see that not only do they use the data, but actually others come on and use the data as well. Now, so through your color palette, you use kind of a variety. We can see, from blacks to blues, to yellows. Tell me a little bit more about the use of your colors and how they help to transfer that data visually. And is that, an important use using colors for you?
Yeah, definitely. It's so colors and texture as well. So I use a lot of my work is sort of monochrome, I'd say, with a pop of color. So I did a print on mountains that's all sort of textured mountain textures basically as the bulk, and then just a highlight of yellow for the sun. And I think I do that a lot to use color to draw people in. And the colors that I'm using, I like bright colors, especially when it's married against the sort of black monochrome of the sort of the rest of the piece. And although it's about the natural world and you think about using colors from nature, we were in Tiree a couple of years ago, and it's one of the islands in the north coast of Scotland, off the northwest coast of Scotland, and it was seaweed sort of floating around in the sea, and it was basically a neon pink. It was a fluorescent pink, and against the blue of the sea, and so there's these colours that I use that are quite fluorescent that you wouldn't maybe associate with the natural world. They seem a bit synthetic, but actually the outdoors gives me inspiration for my colour as well, whether it's actual seaweed and mountains, or even sort of a cabin in the wilderness with a red door or something like that pop of color. So yeah, the color inspiration is from the natural world as well.
Oh gosh, I hope you don't go knocking on all those little red doors. You never know what you're going to find behind there. So, tell us a little bit about the pieces that you've got, ready made for us, on the virtual craft fair. What are some of the pieces, that we can see?
So actually, are you able to share the screen with the picture of the prints?
Yes, of course, I'd love to do that. I'll do that now for you.
So the prints in the fair at the minute are all risographs. So these are a selection of them. They're all inspired by the outdoors. They all use data. So I'll just give you a quick overview from left to right. So left are the Munros. They're 282 Scottish Munros, and these mountain scenes are made up from data of those Munros, which is the altitude as well as the height of the col and the drop, the descent of the Munros. And I use all that data to give texture to the print, as well as sort of trying to show a little bit about the Munros and the difference basically in height. So a Munro is anything over 3,000 feet. But there's like a huge variety in that. And then the one to the right is using data in a different way. It was inspired by Robert McFarlane's book called Landmarks, and where he sort of goes across the UK and looks at different words that describe the landscape, sort of local to specific areas. And I was really fascinated about the words that he was using, and these words describe features of the landscape. So this piece takes those words and visualizes them. And the data element of this is that each letter has a unique value to it. So they're called ASCII codes. So I basically turn words into numerical values, so they're all unique, and use those numerical values that explain the word to create contour lines, or the height of the mountains, the sort of shape of the river. So it's all based on data, but it's also describing these words in the landscape. The next one is bothies, and these are just in Scotland again. And the thing that fascinated me with each of these pieces probably start off quite differently, with a different idea in my head, until I start looking at the data and finding something, like I was saying about that curiosity. And this one, when I was looking at the data, I was originally fascinated by the different types of bothies and how they look quite different and where they're situated in this amazing landscape. And in my head, thinking that they're all quite high up in the mountains. But looking at the data and the sort of altitude data, a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are on low ground. So these mountains, there's 4 of these mountains, and they're split into latitudes, so from 55 degrees north to 58 degrees north. And each of those mountains, so this very front mountain that you can see to the right of the bothy, that's quite low. Those are the far north, those are the bothies in the far north of Scotland. And you can see that mountain's quite low because it's made up of the altitude of where these bothies are situated. So they're basically all on low ground. And then the far right is looking at starling murmuration patterns. And this one was, again, a bit different, using, rather than data, using formula and trying to code patterns from that formula. Yeah, so they're all quite different, and that's the selection they've got at the minute. The risographs as well are, it's not just that I just produce risographs, but these ones all needed to have quite a lot of texture with them. And originally I'd say I tend to screen print. That's the thing that I sort of got into design work through, is screen printing. But because of the texture in a lot of these prints, it doesn't really lend itself to that technique. And because I'm wanting to be considerate to the environment as well, risographs are completely environmentally friendly. The centils are made from banana leaf paper. The inks are actually made from soybeans and water. So it's all entirely environmentally friendly. So yeah, so that's the selection that I've got just now.
Thank you for sharing those. It looks really great. It's actually really interesting to hear, that it's not just kind of data from data which I would expect you to be using, which is purely numbers. It's actually you're using words, and you're using, kind of different ways to interpret and to make data. Is that something you've stumbled across, or is that something that is actually well used?
I don't know if it is particularly well used. To be honest, it's not something I suppose I've really looked at. It's just the technique that I've used to try and communicate the data. So I did a lot of research before starting Plotter into how I could communicate numbers as visuals. But yeah, throughout that, no, I've not really seen anyone. I mean, I'm sure people do, but it was just more of a way to communicate it rather than lending from what's been done in the past.
Now, I know that we've kind of caught up in the past, and a story which I'd love for you to share is telling us about tree rings, because I know that that's obviously set off, something in the past. But again, it's not traditional numbers for me in using data. Tell us a little about the tree rings and what that led to.
Okay, so the tree rings was a piece that I did, again, inspired by a walk in the woods. There was a notice board there that explained about how tree rings develop, and obviously each year tree ring develops. That ring is the outer edge of the tree, so the weather it's affected by the weather. So the spacing between them, the way the colouring and everything about it is affected by the world surrounding it at that time. So I wanted to try and communicate this through using weather data. So I looked at what data was available with the Met Office, and they have a lot of information. And they had a file that goes back to, it's a few hundred years, a couple hundred years, and it's daily temperatures within this sort of triangular period, sort of boundary in the middle of England, sort of around Leeds. I think it's bounded by Leeds, Manchester, and it could be, it's in that area. I don't want to say without remembering specifically, but the data, it calculates the average temperatures, the maximum temperatures, and the coolest temperatures within that area. So I took that information and used each year as a different tree ring, and each element of the ring is created by a different day. So there's 365 days in a year. and 360 degrees in a circle. So it almost translates that each degree of these tree rings represents a day. So then you're creating this really nice tree like pattern that looks like the tree rings. It's actually made up of data. So the variation in the temperatures throughout the year is given that sort of an even line around the rings. And when I first produced this, it looked how I wanted it to look with the tree rings, but it didn't really, because it's so small and there was so much data. I used 100 years packed into such a small space. It didn't really communicate how the earth is heating up. So I looked at the years where I created two versions, a tree rings based on the maximum weather temperature and one based on the minimum. And for the maximum, I looked at the hottest year in each month, and for the coldest, I used the coldest day, and then created sort of tree splits where you'd naturally get these split lines where the wood's sort of separating. I used that visual basically to point to the hottest or the coldest year per month. So there's 12 of these splits. And in the cold version, you've got sort of these huge splits because the coldest years happen to be in far back in the data, sort of 80 years ago, 60 years ago, and so on. Whereas when I did it for the hot ring, some of them you can't even see these splits because most of them are occurring sort of in the past couple of years, so they're really tiny apart from the odd anomaly. So yeah, it was really interesting to sort of try and not just use data to create a picture, but still have that element of trying to communicate the interest in it.
I find it so fascinating. The way that you work is really interesting, how you can kind of use all of that data and the research. I think it's the research that I suppose I'm actually quite jealous that you've got such freedom and such time to do the research and then build and produce these beautiful prints. So actually talking about the prints, certainly that you've kind of selling through us on the virtual craft fair, so we can actually get them framed and unframed, and I think that's like really really important for you, especially you're actually designing from the packaging all the way through to sourcing a really wonderful frame to keep in mind the environmentally friendly way that you work. It'd be wonderful actually just to have a look how easy it is, just to kind of frame, but have a look at one of the frames, that you offer.
Okay, so just as a quick tour, that's the packaging. So you can see it's a tube. The frame is all packaged. That's the oak crane with a little sort of pin in the back that's there to hang up. So it all gets packaged with the poster in the same tube. And then the print, you can see that there that's framed. And when you turn it around, it's basically supported by the magnets. So to take that off, you literally just, oh, that's going to drop. Take it off like that. And again, when you want to put that on, it's just a case of putting I don't know if this is helping or not, but putting the wood across the bottom of it. And there's a little lip to help you guide the paper at the back. And then the magnet just finds the magnet at the back. And if I don't do this straight, it just fixed like that.
It's just ingenious. It's kind of I think when you think about a traditional frame, I don't know if anyone out there does prints or enjoys prints around the home. There's so many different frames, but I've never seen one like that. It just seems kind of nice and quick. It means you can change, and then is it just one hook in the wall and off you go? Yeah. That can take the weight.
Yeah. The string is part of the frame, so it's literally just putting it over the pin that's applied, and yeah.
So kind of looking to the shop, and anyone that wants to go and have a look at the work. I mean, what kind of prices are we looking at for some of your prints held with us?
So the prints, they're risographs, so they're all £30. And then with the frame, they're £40.
No,
You can buy them either framed or in print.
yeah, that's wonderful. It's really accessible, actually. I did, there's such a lot of work in this, so it's really nice that, you can treat yourself to more than one print, on there as well. I mean, just finally, I apologize, I haven't actually asked, where do we find you today? Because I can see it's nice and bright. Where are you in your studio based, and does that actually affect the work as well?
In Edinburgh, so in Scotland. So yeah, so it does. I mean, I'm lucky that there's a lot of nice sort of walks, beaches, and various other things actually within Edinburgh, as everyone's discovered in the past year, sort of not being able to leave your boundary. But yeah, it's obviously really great for the environment and for sort of getting outside. So it inspires it in that way. But I'm sure everywhere has its own places that are there to be discovered. So yeah.
Yes, I've been finding my local Tesco supermarket on my high street. It's been very exciting. I can tell it's a good walk in there, especially queuing. But no, I mean, we can really see kind of where you're based has inspired you. And do you think it would be somewhere that you will stay, in Scotland? Do you think you'll stay, or perhaps, after lockdown, are you looking to kind of, move and travel around? And do you think that might be something that will be fed into your work again?
Well, as in permanently staying, I've been here for 20 years, and it's somewhere that I'm happy, and it's a nice place to be, a nice place to work and to live. In terms of traveling, there's plenty of places, even within the UK, that's has so much wildlife and sort of the north coast of Scotland and the islands that I mentioned that inspired some of the other work. There's so much to see here that there's plenty to keep occupied in the sort of being within in the UK, definitely.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Rebecca. It's been such a joy, to get to know you and the work, and your thinking behind the work. And we've had some really lovely comments. And one here, a big thank you. Combining two apparently unrelated passions like this is incredible. So that's a really lovely feedback. Thank you. You know who you are. Thank you for that. That's a really lovely comment. So please, Rebecca, please take that, through for the rest of the day. So once again, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been really lovely to have you, and do enjoy, the rest of the virtual craft fair, with us over the next couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you.